It was a quiet afternoon when Peter first saw her. He had just finished his work at the local grocery store and was walking home along the quiet road that led through the forest. The trees were thick, casting long shadows on the ground, and the sound of birds singing filled the air. Peter liked walking this way, away from the noise of the town where he could enjoy the peace and think about his day. As he walked, he heard something strange, soft footsteps behind him. Peter turned around, but no one was there. He frowned, thinking it was just his imagination, and continued walking. However, the feeling of being watched didn't go away. He paused, looking around, but all he saw were the trees and the path stretching ahead. Then suddenly, he heard a voice. A small, soft voice calling from the bushes near the side of the path. Peter froze. The voice was so quiet he could barely hear it. It was a little girl's voice. "Excuse me, sir," the voice said, almost like a whisper. Peter stepped closer to the bushes, his heart racing. "Hello?" he called out, his voice unsure. He wasn't sure if he should be afraid or not. From the shadows, a small figure appeared. It was a little girl, no older than 6 or 7. She was wearing ragged clothes, her hair tangled and dirty. She looked up at Peter with wide, frightened eyes. Her face was pale and her body seemed thin, like she hadn't eaten in a long time. Peter's heart went out to her. "Hey, are you okay? Where's your family?" he asked gently, kneeling down to her level. The girl didn't answer at first. She only stared at him, as if trying to decide whether to trust him. Peter's concern grew as he noticed how weak and frightened she looked. He reached into his bag and pulled out a granola bar, holding it out to her. "Are you hungry?" he asked softly. The girl's eyes flickered to the food, but she didn't move. Instead, she asked, "Do you know who I am?" Peter blinked, surprised by the question. "No, I don't," he said slowly. "Do you need help getting home?" She looked at the granola bar again but shook her head. "I'm not supposed to go home," she whispered. "They're looking for me." Peter's curiosity grew even more. "Who's looking for you? Do you want me to take you to the police?" The little girl didn't answer. Instead, she took a step back, her eyes still locked onto his. "You don't know who I am, do you?" she asked again, her voice trembling. Peter was confused. "I don't understand," he said, standing up and looking around. "Where are your parents?" The girl didn't respond. Instead, she took another step back into the shadows as if she was trying to hide herself from something or someone. Her gaze never left Peter, though, and he felt an unsettling chill run through him. Before Peter could speak again, the girl suddenly turned and darted off into the forest, disappearing into the thick trees like she had vanished into thin air. Peter stood still, his heart pounding in his chest. He glanced around, expecting to see someone or something following her, but the forest was empty, quiet, and still. He waited a moment, unsure of what just happened, then slowly began walking in the direction the girl had gone. But she was gone. There was no sign of her anywhere. Peter stopped and rubbed his eyes, trying to make sense of what had just occurred. He hadn't imagined it. He knew what he had seen. A little girl had spoken to him and then vanished right before his eyes. He couldn't understand it. For a moment, he felt a strange unease, as if something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Maybe she was just scared and running away from something bad, he thought. Maybe he'd help her find her way home, and it would all make sense. But even as Peter continued on his walk, a strange feeling lingered in the back of his mind. He had no idea that this strange encounter would change everything. As Peter turned the corner toward his house, he tried to shake off the strange encounter. It was just a little girl, lost and confused, right? But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that something about the whole situation didn't feel right. The way she looked at him, the way she spoke, it was as if she knew something he didn't. As he reached his doorstep and looked back toward the darkening woods, he couldn't help but feel that this wasn't the last time he would see her. The days after the mysterious encounter with the little girl felt like a blur to Peter. He couldn't shake the feeling of unease that followed him everywhere. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow in the corner of his eye seemed to remind him of the girl who had vanished so suddenly. Who was she? Why did she say that he didn't know who she was? And why had she run off into the forest like that? These questions weighed heavily on his mind. But life moved on. Peter tried to forget about the strange event, telling himself it was just some odd encounter, a figment of his imagination. He returned to his daily routine, though it was hard to shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Something he couldn't control. Then 3 days later, as Peter was leaving his small house to head to the market, he saw her again. This time, the girl wasn't alone. Peter was walking down the same quiet road, his mind busy with thoughts of the upcoming day when he noticed a figure standing at the edge of the forest. He stopped, squinting, unsure if his eyes were playing tricks on him. It was the little girl, standing still and watching him with those same wide, searching eyes. She wasn't alone anymore. Standing beside her was a woman, tall and graceful, with dark, long hair that shimmered in the sunlight. She was dressed in a fine, dark blue dress which seemed strange for someone walking through the forest. But it was the look in her eyes that caught Peter's attention. The woman was staring at him with an intense gaze, as if she knew him, knew everything about him. Peter hesitated. Should he approach them? Should he call for help? But before he could decide, the little girl raised her hand and waved at him. "Hello again," she said softly, her voice as quiet as before. But now there was something different in it, a sense of urgency. Peter swallowed hard, walking closer but keeping his distance. You're back," he said, his voice unsteady. "Where have you been?" The girl didn't answer but instead looked up at the woman beside her. The woman smiled faintly, though it seemed forced. She stepped forward, her eyes never leaving Peter's face. There was something almost otherworldly about her presence, a strange energy that surrounded her. "Thank you for helping my daughter," the woman said, her voice calm, but filled with a certain weight. "We've been looking for you." Peter frowned. "Looking for me? I don't even know who you are or where she came from." The woman glanced down at the girl, then back at Peter. "You don't know yet, but you will." Her voice was soft, but firm, as if she was speaking to someone who had to understand something important. "We're in danger and I need your help." Peter blinked, confused. "Danger? What kind of danger? What are you talking about?" The woman's eyes seemed to darken for a moment. "It's not safe for us here. They will come for us soon, and if we don't act fast, we won't be able to stop them." Peter's mind raced. Who was she talking about? Who would come for them? Before he could ask another question, the little girl stepped forward again. "You can help us. You have to," she said, her voice trembling, though there was a strange strength in it. Peter felt his heart racing. I don't know what you mean. I'm just a regular guy. I can't help you." The woman shook her head, her expression serious now. "You may not think you can, but you're the only one who can protect us. You're part of something much bigger than you realize." Peter took a step back. He didn't know if he was just imagining things, but there was something off about everything the woman said. Was she serious? Could she really be telling the truth? "I don't understand," Peter muttered, feeling a rising panic in his chest. "I just helped her because she was lost. That's it. I'm no hero. I'm just a guy living a normal life." The woman's expression softened, but there was still a hint of something dangerous in her eyes. "You are much more than that," she said quietly, her voice filled with an emotion Peter couldn't place. "And the time will come when you'll have to face what's to come. But until then, please listen. We need your help." Peter stared at them both, his mind swirling. He couldn't understand why these two, especially the woman, seemed to know so much about him. And why was he suddenly thrust into this situation? He felt as if he was standing on the edge of something he couldn't quite comprehend, but somehow knew he couldn't ignore. The girl reached out and took Peter's hand, her touch cold but comforting at the same time. "Please," she whispered, "we're running out of time." Peter looked from the little girl to the woman and back again. He didn't know what to believe, but deep inside, he knew that his life was about to change in a way he could never have imagined. The strange encounter with the little girl had opened a door, and now there was no turning back. Peter stood frozen, unsure of what to say next. The girl, still gripping his hand, stared up at him with those intense, knowing eyes. Her expression was serious, as though she understood the gravity of what was happening more than he did. The woman beside her kept her gaze on Peter, her silence speaking volumes. There was something in the air, something charged with tension, and Peter couldn't shake the feeling that he was caught in something much bigger than he could have ever imagined. "Why me?" Peter finally asked, his voice shaking with uncertainty. "Why am I the one who can help you? I don't even know who you are. What's going on here?" The woman took a slow, deliberate step forward. Her face, though calm, was filled with a quiet urgency. "Peter, you've already helped us more than you realize. You don't need to understand everything right now. Just know that you're a part of this, whether you like it or not." Peter's heart pounded in his chest. He was a simple man, a grocery store worker who lived a quiet life. Why would these two people, these strangers, think he was capable of helping them? He felt completely out of his depth. The woman noticed his hesitation and gently placed a hand on his arm. Her touch was cool but not unkind. "I know this is hard to believe. I know you're scared. But trust me, your life is about to change whether you're ready or not." Peter took a step back, his mind racing. "I don't know what you want from me, but I can't—" "You don't have a choice," the woman interrupted, her tone soft but firm. "You see, my daughter and I are not from this world, Peter. We've come from a place far beyond what you know. And there are people after us, dangerous people who will stop at nothing to find us." Peter's stomach turned. His head spun as the woman's words hit him like a blow. "You're not from this world?" he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "What are you talking about? How is that even possible?" The little girl looked up at him, her small face full of a quiet sadness. "It's true. We're not like you. We're different." Peter felt as if the ground was shifting beneath him. Everything he thought he knew about life and the world was suddenly being questioned. He had to blink a few times, trying to make sense of the situation. "What do you mean, different? What kind of people are you?" The woman sighed deeply, her eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and determination. "We come from a world that no one on this planet could ever imagine. It's a place full of advanced technology, energy beyond your understanding, and people who have abilities that seem impossible. But we've been forced to flee. We've been hunted." Peter struggled to process the words. His mind seemed to short-circuit. He wanted to dismiss everything she was saying as some sort of strange dream or joke. But the look in her eyes, the sincerity, the fear, told him otherwise. He shook his head. "This can't be real. I mean, this isn't happening. You're not—" "It is happening," the woman said firmly. "And the truth is, you're the only one who can help us." Peter's confusion grew. "Help you? How?" "I'm just an ordinary guy. I have no special skills, no powers, no training." "Why me?" The woman's eyes softened, and she stepped closer to Peter. She looked directly into his eyes, and for a moment, Peter felt as though she was seeing something inside him, something deep and hidden that he didn't understand. "Because you're the key," she said softly. "The way your energy resonates with ours. It's the only chance we have. You don't have to believe it, but the truth is, without you, we're lost." Peter took another step back, feeling like he was suffocating in the intensity of the moment. "I don't know what you want me to do. I'm not a superhero. I can't fight anyone off. I can't help you against whatever you're running from." The woman's expression turned serious. "I know, but we need you for something else. Something that might sound strange, but it's the only way. We need you to marry me." Peter blinked, his heart skipping a beat. "What?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "You want me to marry you?" The woman nodded. "Yes, it's the only way to protect us. To keep us safe." Peter stood there, speechless. His mind was spinning. This couldn't be real. How could he possibly marry a stranger, a woman he had just met days ago, and why? He had no answers to any of the questions swirling in his mind. The little girl, still holding his hand, looked up at him again. "You're the one who can protect us. Please, you have to." Peter's mind raced. He wanted to refuse. He wanted to tell them to leave, to go back to whatever strange world they had come from. But there was something in their eyes, something that made him feel as though this was bigger than him, bigger than anything he had ever known. They were in desperate need of help, and despite his confusion and fear, Peter knew he couldn't turn his back on them. I don't know," he said quietly, his voice filled with doubt. "I can't just marry you. This is insane." The woman's face softened, and she stepped even closer to Peter. "I understand. It's a lot to ask. But you have to believe me. This is the only way." Peter's heart was pounding, his thoughts a whirlwind. How could this be happening? How could he even think about agreeing to something so absurd? Yet deep inside, he knew there was no turning back. Peter stood there, still reeling from the woman's request. Marry her? It seemed like a joke, but the look in her eyes told him it wasn't. She was serious, and that terrified him more than anything. He felt a wave of panic rise within him, but he tried to calm himself. He needed to think, to process everything that had been happening so fast. The woman, seeing the struggle on his face, gave him a moment to breathe. I know this is overwhelming, she said softly, but there's no time to waste. They're coming for us. We don't have the luxury of waiting for you to understand it all. Peter shook his head. This is crazy. You expect me to marry you just to protect you from whoever these people are? I don't even know who they are. Her eyes softened. I understand it's hard to grasp, but you have to trust me. Marrying me is the only way to keep us safe. Peter couldn't believe what he was hearing. A marriage. To a stranger. It was absurd. But there was something in the way the woman spoke, a quiet desperation that made it impossible to dismiss her words. And when he looked down at the little girl holding onto his hand with such trust in her eyes, something inside him stirred. He didn't know what it was, but he felt the weight of their need. Why me? He asked again, his voice quieter this time. Why not someone else? Someone who knows what they're doing? I'm not even close to the person you need. The woman stepped closer, her gaze steady. You are the only one who can help us. It's something in you, Peter. Something that you don't even realize yet. Your connection to us. It's the only hope we have left. Peter felt his mind whirling. It made no sense. He was a simple man with no extraordinary skills, no abilities beyond the ordinary. He wasn't a fighter. He wasn't anyone special. Yet here he was, caught in a situation where the fate of two strangers depended on him. The little girl squeezed his hand. Please, you have to, she whispered, her voice pleading. You're the only one who can protect us. Peter felt his heart squeeze in his chest. Her trust in him was almost overwhelming. He wanted to refuse. He wanted to walk away, tell them this was too much for him. But deep down he knew he couldn't do that. He couldn't turn his back on them. Not when they were looking at him like that. He let out a deep breath. Okay, I'll marry you. But I don't understand. I don't know how I can protect you or why I'm the one who can. But I'll do whatever it takes. The woman's face softened, a look of relief washing over her. Thank you. You don't know how much this means to us. She paused, then added, We'll explain everything in time, but for now the most important thing is that you're with us. We can't face this alone. Peter nodded slowly, feeling a strange mixture of fear and determination. This was far beyond anything he had ever imagined for his life, but the choice had been made. He had agreed to marry a woman he barely knew, for reasons he didn't fully understand, in order to protect her and her daughter from some kind of danger. Where do we go from here? Peter asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. What happens next? The woman smiled faintly, but there was a sadness in her eyes. We must move quickly. There's no time to waste. The people hunting us. She stopped and glanced around, her voice lowering. They can find us anywhere. We have to keep moving. Peter looked at her, his heart heavy with a mix of fear and responsibility. How long have you been running from them? He asked quietly. The woman's eyes darkened. For years, she replied softly. We've been running since she was born. Peter looked down at the little girl whose eyes held a quiet sadness. There was so much he didn't know, so much he didn't understand, but he couldn't deny the connection he felt, as if somehow their fate was now intertwined. He had made a promise to help them, and now he had to follow through, no matter how strange or dangerous the journey might be. As the three of them began walking down the road, heading for the unknown, Peter's mind kept racing. How had he gotten here? How had he gone from an ordinary life to this strange, impossible reality? He glanced at the woman and her daughter, both of whom seemed to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. Yet there was a quiet strength in them too. He could feel it. They walked in silence for a while, the weight of the situation hanging heavy in the air. Peter couldn't help but wonder what kind of danger they were facing. What kind of enemies were after them? And why did he have to marry this woman to protect them? But one thing was certain. He had made a commitment. And despite the fear and confusion, he would stick to it. He would do whatever it took to help them, even if it meant facing things he couldn't possibly understand. And deep inside, something told him this was only the beginning. The days that followed were a blur of uncertainty. Peter had never imagined his life would take such a strange turn. He had gone from a simple, solitary man to being thrust into the center of a whirlwind that he didn't understand. The woman and her daughter had become his responsibility, but with it came an overwhelming sense of danger. They were no longer safe here in this quiet town, hiding in plain sight. Peter's mind was in turmoil. The strange, cryptic words of the woman kept replaying in his head. They're coming for us. But who were they? Who were these enemies that were so powerful? They could track them anywhere. He had agreed to marry the woman, though it felt more like a vow of protection than anything romantic. But every night the fear crept into his mind. Could he really protect them? Was he capable of standing up to whatever threat was following them? The thought of failure haunted him, and he felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him more with each passing day. One evening, as Peter sat at the small table in the back of the house they had rented, the woman came in with her daughter. Their faces were more serious than usual. "We need to leave," the woman said without preamble, her voice low and urgent. Peter stood up instantly. "What's going on?" "They're close," the woman replied, her eyes scanning the room as if she could feel the danger even now. "We need to get out of here before they find us." Peter's heart sank. "Who are they? What are they going to do?" The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked down at her daughter, who stood quietly beside her, her face unusually calm. Then with a deep breath, the woman spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're not just any people, Peter. They are from my world, part of the faction that hunts those like me. We're seen as fugitives. My daughter and I are marked, and they have the power to track us no matter where we go. They won't stop until we're taken." Peter's blood ran cold at the mention of being taken. What did that mean? What kind of power did these people have? The woman's voice trembled slightly as she added, "And the worst part is they've already found us once. We barely escaped. But now they're coming for us again." Peter's mind raced. His chest tightened as he processed what she was saying. I don't understand," he stammered. "Why are they after you? What do they want?" The woman glanced at her daughter, then back at Peter. "They want to control us, to use us for our abilities. We can do things that are far beyond what anyone on this planet can imagine." Peter took a step back, overwhelmed by the weight of her words. Abilities, powers? He had seen nothing that would hint at that. But then he recalled the strange moments, the inexplicable aura around the woman and her daughter, the way they always seemed to know things before they happened. Could it be true? "And what does that have to do with me?" Peter asked, his voice shaking. The woman took a deep breath as if gathering strength. "You don't realize it, but you've already become part of this. Your connection to us, it's more important than you know. You've been marked by them too, just by helping us." Peter felt a cold chill run down his spine. "Marked? What does that mean?" The woman's face softened with a hint of sadness. "It means that they'll come for you too. They can sense anyone who is connected to us, anyone who has become part of our fight. They won't rest until they capture us all." Peter's stomach churned. He hadn't signed up for any of this. He hadn't asked to be part of some cosmic war or hunted by powerful beings from another world. And yet here he was, unwillingly bound to these strangers, tied to a fight he didn't understand. As he tried to process the weight of what she was saying, there was a sudden sound at the window. A sharp noise like the tapping of metal. Peter's heart skipped a beat. He rushed to the window and peeked out cautiously. What he saw made his blood run cold. Shadows. Figures in the distance, moving quickly through the trees toward the house. They were too far for Peter to make out clearly, but the sense of danger was immediate, overwhelming. "They've found us," the woman whispered. "We need to move now." Without hesitation, Peter grabbed his jacket and ran to the door. The little girl and her mother followed, moving with practiced ease as if they had done this 100 times before. But Peter's mind was still reeling. These weren't just ordinary people, and the more he learned, the less he understood. They made their way down the narrow street, the shadows of the figures in the trees now much closer. Peter's thoughts raced and his breath came in shallow bursts. They had no plan, no destination, just the instinct to run, to escape. And yet, despite the fear clawing at him, Peter couldn't help but feel that somehow this was his destiny, that he was meant to be part of this, no matter how terrifying it had become. As they turned a corner, Peter glanced back. The shadows were gone, but the unease remained, a gnawing feeling that told him this was only the beginning. Something was coming, something big, and Peter had no idea how it was all going to end. But one thing was certain. There was no turning back now. The tension was palpable as Peter and the woman, along with her daughter, moved through the darkened streets. The sounds of their hurried footsteps echoed off the empty buildings, blending with the rustling leaves. Peter's heart was pounding in his chest as he glanced over his shoulder, the weight of what they were running from pressing heavily on him. The woman, whose name Peter still hadn't learned, kept her eyes forward, her focus unshaken. It was as if she had seen this before, running, hiding, never truly safe. The little girl, though smaller than both of them, walked with surprising determination. Peter couldn't help but wonder what kind of life they had led before this, what dangers they had faced. He glanced at her now, her face pale and set in a grim expression, her eyes staring straight ahead. He couldn't understand what was happening. She seemed so small and innocent, yet her presence was undeniably important. Crucial even. There was something about her, something beyond her fragile appearance that made Peter feel there was more to her than met the eye. As they turned down a narrow alley, the woman finally broke the silence. "We need to stop. We can't keep running like this forever." Peter's breath caught in his throat. "What do you mean? We're not safe. We can't just stop." The woman stopped walking, her expression serious. "We have to," she said. "The truth is, we're running out of options. The people who are hunting us, they know where we are now. But we still have one last chance. We need to find a place to hide, a place where we can make a stand." Peter nodded, though he still didn't fully understand what she was saying. "But why are they after us? What do they want from you?" She looked down at the little girl, her eyes filled with sadness. "It's not just about me. It's about her." Peter blinked, taken aback. "Her, but she's just a child?" The woman's voice was sharp, cutting through his words. "She's not just a child. She's the key. The reason they're hunting us." Peter's heart skipped a beat as his gaze flicked to the girl. He had suspected there was something different about her, something he couldn't quite put into words, but hearing the woman's words confirmed his fears. The girl wasn't just an innocent bystander in this chaotic world they were navigating. She was at the center of it all. Before Peter could say anything, the little girl spoke, her voice small but firm. "I'm not just any girl. I'm the last of my kind." Peter's chest tightened. The weight of her words sank in. "The last of your kind?" he echoed, his voice barely a whisper. The girl nodded, her eyes meeting his. "I come from a place far away, a place that's not like Earth, and my people were destroyed." Peter felt a chill spread through him as the magnitude of her words hit him. "Destroyed?" he repeated. "By who? Why?" The woman stepped forward, her face grim. "It's a long story, Peter, but it's important that you understand. My daughter, she's the last surviving member of an entire race. A race of beings with abilities beyond anything you could imagine. And there are people out there who want to use her powers." Peter swallowed hard, his mind racing. "What kind of powers?" The little girl hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "I can manipulate energy. I can control things that most people can't even see. And because of that, they want to capture me. They want to use me to gain control over worlds, entire galaxies." She looked down, her small hands trembling. "I'm not safe anywhere." Peter's stomach turned as he processed the weight of what she was saying. A girl with powers beyond anything he could imagine, and people, dangerous people, were after her to exploit those abilities. It sounded like something out of a science fiction novel, but this was real, and now he was caught in the middle of it. "But why didn't you tell me this before?" Peter asked, his voice filled with frustration. "Why keep it a secret? Why didn't you trust me?" The woman met his gaze, her expression softening. "We didn't want to burden you with the truth. We hoped we could protect her without dragging you into this. But now it's too late. They found us." Peter's mind was racing, trying to process everything he had just learned. He looked down at the little girl again, her face full of worry but also determination. Despite her small stature, he could see now that she was the one with the most strength. The weight of an entire race's survival rested on her tiny shoulders. Peter reached out slowly, kneeling down to her level. "I don't know what's going on, but I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe. I promise." The girl looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "You're the only one who can help." If you don't, they'll take me. And I don't know what will happen after that. Peter nodded, the gravity of the situation sinking in. He wasn't just protecting a woman and her daughter anymore. He was protecting the last hope of an entire race. The responsibility weighed heavily on him, but there was no turning back now. He had made his choice, and now he had to see it through. Then let's make sure they don't get you, Peter said, his voice filled with determination. And as they continued down the dark alley, the world around them seemed to close in, but Peter's resolve had never been clearer. No matter what it took, he would protect them. The silence was deafening as Peter, the woman, and the little girl stood in the heart of the abandoned building. The walls were cracked and weathered, the air thick with the smell of dust and old wood. Outside, the world was dark, but in the distance, Peter could hear the faint sound of footsteps. They were close. Too close, Peter's mind raced. He had promised to protect them, but the reality of what they were facing seemed impossible to comprehend. The enemies they had been running from for so long were now closing in. No more hiding, no more running. The woman who had introduced herself as Lyra stood at the center of the room, her face pale but resolute. Beside her, the little girl, Erin, clutched Peter's hand tightly, her small fingers trembling, but her gaze was sharp, filled with a quiet strength that belied her age. Peter's pulse quickened. He couldn't believe how much his life had changed in such a short time. He had gone from an ordinary man living a quiet life to being the protector of two extraordinary beings from another world, and now the moment of truth had arrived. You said we had one last chance, Peter said, his voice barely above a whisper. What do we do now? Lyra's gaze shifted from Erin to Peter. We make our stand here, she replied. This is the place we've been running to, the place that can protect us. But we need to fight, Peter. We can't let them take Erin. We have to stop them here and now. Peter swallowed hard. The fear was there, gnawing at him, but beneath it something else stirred, a sense of purpose. For the first time in days, the uncertainty that had plagued him seemed to recede. He wasn't just running anymore. He was part of something bigger, something that needed to be protected at all costs. He turned to Erin, who looked up at him with her large, solemn eyes. Are you ready? He asked, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Erin nodded, her small hand tightening around his. I have to be, she said softly. If I don't, they'll destroy everything. I can't let that happen. The words hit Peter harder than he expected. He hadn't truly understood until now, until Erin spoke them so plainly, that this wasn't just about surviving. This was about saving a world, saving a future. The sound of footsteps grew louder, closer now. The enemies were almost here. Peter's heart raced, but there was no turning back. Get ready, Lyra said, her voice sharp and commanding. She stepped forward, her hands raised as if she were preparing to channel something unseen. Something powerful. Peter's eyes widened as he saw the faint glow of energy swirling around her hands, a soft blue light that flickered like electricity. The air in the room seemed to hum, charged with an energy he couldn't explain. Erin's eyes flickered for a moment, and Peter felt an overwhelming surge of warmth wash over him. The girl wasn't just ordinary. She was extraordinary. Your connection to us, Lyra said, her voice filled with urgency. It's more than just protection. You're part of this energy. You have the ability to help us stop them. Peter shook his head, confused. I don't understand. I can't do what you can do. You're wrong, Lyra said, stepping closer to him. You have a gift too, just like Erin. It's in you, Peter. You've been connected to us since the moment you helped her. You don't have to be afraid of it. Peter's heart raced. He couldn't explain it, but as Lyra spoke, something inside him shifted. It wasn't a feeling of power exactly, but a sense of understanding, like a door opening that had always been closed. Suddenly, the door to the building slammed open. A group of figures stood silhouetted in the doorway, their shapes tall and imposing. The air seemed to grow colder, and Peter could feel the malevolent force in the room shift. These were the ones they had been running from, the ones who had hunted them across worlds. The leader of the group stepped forward, a tall figure cloaked in black. His face was hidden, but his eyes glowed with an unsettling intensity. It's over, he said in a voice that echoed in the room. You can't hide anymore. You can't escape. Peter felt the chill of dread slip into his bones. But just as quickly, that strange understanding he had felt earlier flared inside him again. A flash of blue energy surged through his hands and he stared at them in disbelief. It was real. The power was real. He didn't know how it worked, but he knew deep down that this was the moment. This was the time to fight. Lyra turned to him, her face filled with pride and hope. "Now, Peter, together, we can stop them." Without thinking, Peter reached out, his hand crackling with blue energy. It surged through him like a river, filling him with a strength he hadn't known existed. The leader of the enemy group hesitated, sensing the change in the room. But it was too late. The energy Peter had unlocked erupted in a brilliant burst of light, shooting toward the enemies with blinding speed. The leader raised his hands, trying to block the attack, but it was no use. The energy surged through the room like a wave, knocking them back with a force that rattled the walls. Peter stood firm, his focus unwavering. Aaron's voice cut through the chaos. "We're not alone, Peter. You never were." As the last of the enemies were sent flying back, their forms crumbling into nothingness, the room fell silent. Peter stood breathing heavily, the power inside him ebbing but leaving behind a sense of victory. The threat had passed. For now. Lyra and Aaron stood beside him, both of them smiling, though their expressions were tinged with exhaustion. "You did it," Lyra said, her voice filled with gratitude. "We're safe." Peter looked at Aaron, her face full of hope and trust. "No," he said, his voice steady. "We're just getting started."